All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Disruption, our live stream brought to you by the Pandemonium team. Today, we're going to be taking you through a very exciting topic with Adrian Dunkley. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. Some of us might know it as AI, but yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hope you're going to find it interesting. Let's learn a little bit more about who is Adrian. So, Adrian is a data scientist and an AI researcher. His passion is solving problems using the data around us and human creativity. He brings unique perspectives gained from his work in academia, startups, and large corporations, developing analytics and ML driven solutions for banking, e commerce, travel and safety, and entertainment, just to name a few. So, Adrian, he's all over the place, man. He holds a double major in math and physics, uh, MSc in enterprise risk management, and MSc in financial engineering. And he is also pursuing a doctorate in the ethical use of AI for customer gamification. In addition, Adrian is the head of the nonprofit Humans for AI Caribbean, and he's also the VP of Data and Decision Sciences for Cornerstone Bank and Barita Investments Limited. His favorite data quote is, and I quote, data, data, data. I can't make bricks without clay by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So, Adrian, welcome.
Hi, thank you. That was longer than I thought. And I
Yeah,
read.
but Adrian, before we get into our presentation, I saw our bio, I saw your bio, and I saw that quote, and I've been scratching my head ever since. So, Adrian, you're going to have to explain to me what in the world does that mean?
So, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, you may not necessarily be familiar with him. Great author. He is the.
I am familiar with him, of
Oh,
course. Yes,
wonderful.
he is from
Wonderful.
the Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
Yes. Ah, okay. So I know
Yes,
something.
right, right. So, the idea there is Sherlock Holmes is supposed to be. Can you see me?
I can't see you just
Hold
yet.
on. How about now?
So I see that you're coming, but I can't see you just yet. So while you're getting your camera up, though, Adrian, so you were telling me about your quote and the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle inspiration.
Right. So, with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the idea there was is creating the fantastic situations of a brilliant, manic individual Sherlock Holmes who can solve any crime with the smallest bit of data, which is really what you're trying to do with data science and AI. Is you're trying to take all of these individual data points, put them together to get insights, and then from those insights, you make decisions that generate value for the individuals.
Ah, so the data is essentially the building
In this
blocks.
case, he's trying to and stuff like that. Right, right.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So you've made it a little bit clearer for me. All right. So I know you're still trying to get your camera up, but I understand that you're going to be taking us through a presentation first. Yes?
Yes, I am.
All right. So anytime you're ready.
Okay.
So I know definitely, we're talking about AI. So this obviously seems fitting that we are trying to work through a glitch in the matrix, huh?
Yeah,
If that is
that's
not
right.
irony, I don't know what is. But I think, in this new virtual reality that we work in, we all have these encounters on a daily basis. So, yeah.
Okay, can you see my screen?
I
I
am not
am not
seeing your
seeing your
screen.
screen.
Yes,
Yes,
seeing it
seeing it
now.
now.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so we are Startup AI. We're about social good and business value creation. Our tagline is more than data analytics, more than research, more than AI, you at the center. You see how I stumbled a little bit there? That's because it's a brand new tagline, so I'm just getting used to it. So our mission is really make the Caribbean the global hub and the global leader in analytics and AI. So big thing, we have a lot of competition already. But our core values to get us there: adaptability, respect for all, knowledge seeking and sharing, collaborative, and self improving, which is what AI is about. So we'll start with data because pretty much that's the fuel of AI. So data is pretty much anything that you can collect, perceive, or do. All of that can be categorized as data. So generally speaking, you have two forms of it, but there are a lot of different forms. So you have quantitative and qualitative, but you also say structured and unstructured in a sense. So qualitative data is what time is it right now, how many socks do I have on, uh, how many kids do I have that I don't know about. That wasn't pointing at anybody. But qualitative is more, you have colors, for instance. You have how do you feel right now, emotions and things like that. You can still quantify them in a sense, but when you really think about it, what's a color, right? And then with that, you have these sub areas. Won't bore you too much with that. Um, so this is actually a plug. This is one of our investors, RGR Gleaner Group. So partial plug, but it's being used for educational purposes. When you look at this newspaper, all right, and you try and collect all of the data points in this newspaper article, top left, you have day of the week, you have the brands, you have the colors, you have the celebrities that are on the newspaper, you have the text included there, you have quotes, you have the positioning, the pricing, there's a website link there, and all of these things, right? So all of these things are data points. So even though it's a flat piece of paper, you can break it down into a multitude of different ways to get value from it. Because this speaks to what was interesting on that day, who was the advertiser, a lot of things about the newspaper, as well as the people who will be reading it. So what we do is we take data on individuals and companies, anonymized and available data that we have access to, and we use that to better the experience of what you have to go through, right, as a person. So for this newspaper, some people might say, well, I don't really care about sports. I don't really care about Sting or Shaggy. I don't care about anything here. I'm more focused with the color. I like the different colors here. I like the quote there. That attracts me to it. So we'll come in and we'll say, okay, these are the things that you can do based on the tools and methodologies that we apply to improve what you're doing for your customer and also improve how you do your job. Yes, there's a lot of ways to break it down. You get into data, you naturally get into algorithms. So what's an algorithm? So the simplest definition is this series of instructions. They're followed step by step, and they have a level of order to them. So you can use algorithms to categorize things and to make certain decisions. So the idea here would be, let's say you're in a company and you want to see if you should get a bonus, right? Your boss has set a target for you for the year, right? His algorithm is, I'm going to measure that target. If the target is met, true, then you'll get a bonus. But then based on how high the target is versus the expected or what you actually got in place, that will determine the level of bonus that you have in place. So it allows you to consistently set some rules and instructions that are followed over and over again, right? But that is the initial phase of what AI pretty much was. It's come very far from that, but this is the base of what it is. So, what is AI? Because that's the big question, right? So, it's a field of study. It's an area of research. It's a huge industry worth over $300 billion globally, USD. It's all of these things, but either there is you're creating a computer, you're creating an entity, a well, not a non-biological entity that has the ability to learn, quote unquote, without being explicitly programmed, right? So the algorithms that you had there were you explicitly setting rules for a computer or an individual to follow. Where AI comes in now is we're saying take away some of that human requirement or human intervention in there and figure it out for yourself. But the big thing with this is how exactly do you train something that isn't real or isn't alive to make decisions, right? That's very difficult. So you have a level of statistics as well. So what you do is you'll tell the algorithm, these are the steps in place, but continue to do them until you reach a certain point of success. So it's a lot of trial and error. So AI is a general field, and then within AI is machine learning. So machine learning focuses specifically on using data you have on hand to learn rules and to learn patterns. So think of when you go on Netflix, you've watched, let's say, 10 movies, and all of the movies are about, let's say, romance, right? It's highly likely that when you go on, Netflix is going to recommend a romance movie to you because it identified a pattern. It doesn't exactly know why you like romance movies, but objectively, historically, it has the data to say you've been on 10 times, and every single time you're on, you watch a romance movie. So it's highly likely the next time you come on, you're going to watch a romance movie. And it's not always right, which is fine because AI isn't trying to be perfect. It's just trying to get at uh, not even a general solution, but a solution that works most of the time and benefits you effectively. So the amazing thing with Netflix was they collected all this data on people and what they liked and regions and stuff like that. They don't ask you to fill out a questionnaire, right? They look at what you're doing on the site, and then based on that, they determine these are your preferences, these are the things that you like. And there are many different ways to do this, but they do it extremely well, obviously. They're not necessarily profitable as yet, but that's because they're pushing into content. And it went to the point that they knew people so well and their interests so well that they started creating content specifically for those types of persons. So it aided them in developing scripts, coming up with general ideas for stories, the actors and actresses to include in there, the types of music, where it should be set. All of these things were accounted for. But again, with AI, it doesn't exactly know the underlying reasons. It has a good guess, but it doesn't have the ability to experience what you experience. So you still always need a human involved in the process. That's extremely important. Now, when you get into machine learning, now there's a subset of machine learning that basically made AI the forefront, allowed us to do these amazing things. Every time you pick up your phone and you talk to your phone, or you take a picture and your phone labels the image, or you get a very quick recommendation without barely doing anything. You go on TikTok and they know what you like after like a couple of minutes. You go on YouTube and they recommend really good videos, and they do automatically generated subtitles for the videos. That is all pushed by something called deep learning. So deep learning is a subset of machine learning that very, very loosely tries to imitate how the animal brain is constructed, specifically the neurons in the brain. And then what it does there is you have these interconnected points. And what it does is you give it some examples, you give it some data, and you say, all right, try and figure out the patterns. And it's like this huge simultaneous equation. Everybody familiar with simultaneous equation from, I don't know, high school and stuff like that?
From
These are,
long time ago.
yeah, right. So
Yes.
this is simultaneous equations on steroids, right? We're talking about millions up to the point right now where the biggest model has trillions of data points, right? And millions of equations in there. And all it does is it flicks different switches until it reaches a point where it's very effective. So it's like a brute force technique. But the concern with that though is it's brute force, so it tries to find patterns. That's one thing with AI. It loves patterns, right? Just like humans do. So anybody ever seen a ghost?
A ghost
Yeah, a ghost. You ever seen a ghost before?
on TV, yes.
TV. So maybe some people have seen ghosts in real life. Not knock on wood, I'm not calling anything on myself. I don't need proof that they exist. But that is your mind plays tricks on you. The reason why we are at the top of the food chain, we are basically as we know, the most intelligent beings with respect to how we measure intelligence on the earth is because our ability to identify patterns and then to work together. as a group, as units. Those two things make us extremely dangerous and powerful. So deep learning focuses on the first part, which is identifying patterns. But what you can actually do is, if you don't have the expertise and understanding, is it'll find a pattern in anything. So that's why you can trick it. So you can show it a dog that's in a mouse outfit, and it'll think it's a mouse, and it won't understand that it's a dog in a mouse outfit. We're working on that though. And then you have different types of machine learning. We're going to focus on machine learning when we use the term now. You have supervised, which is pretty much think of like you have a baby and you're trying to teach it stuff. So you keep repeating words to it or numbers over and over. And it doesn't exactly know how to say it, and it says it wrong a lot of times. But then it gets a little bit closer. And what you do is you nudge it. You incentivize it. Yeah, you're doing good. You're doing good. Yeah, you said that word properly. And it's that incentive, that is that positive reinforcement that allows it to do better. But what you do is you give it different examples of how to say it and how not to say it, right? And then from that, it learns how to do it. So babies are really, really good at learning, right? There have been some reports saying that the best AI isn't anywhere near. Obviously, babies are more intelligent than AI. AI is pretty good at very specific stuff, but it isn't generally intelligent, right? It's just really good at making fast inferences. Next one is unsupervised. The idea there is you don't really know necessarily what you're looking for. You don't know exactly what to tell it, the machine learning model. You just give it data and say, figure it out. And we use a lot of statistical techniques and specific algorithms to do that. So it tries to find patterns or it tries to find variances or deviations in the data. And it'll say, oh, look at this. This is what I found. So it doesn't necessarily know what it's doing. It's just looking for specific things in the data. And you don't either until you review and try and put that human understanding in on it to say exactly why is this going on. Then you have reinforcement learning, and that focuses more on when you have these very odd problems that are hard to define. So, for instance, you're trying to teach a baby to walk. You pretty much know just lift it up and make it move its legs. It's watching you, but try to teach a robot to walk. That's a very complicated thing to do. That requires so much. So what reinforcement learning allows you to do is you can set an environment for this thing that you're teaching, and it'll just keep doing stuff over and over until it gets to the point that you need it to, and you reward it for achieving the actions. So it's very good at teaching robots to walk. It's really good at marketing now. It's being used a lot in terms of marketing. Well, in certain areas. We've done a lot of work with it as well, but it's very effective because there's no underlying assumption what you're doing. You're just focusing on the results. And then here are three examples of it, so we're kind of clear on exactly how you'd apply it to a real world scenario. So first one is Sir, supervised. I know the customer segments that enjoy reading my online articles. Are any of these new customer segments going to like a lifestyle article? So that's the same way as 80% of Jamaicans watched Money Heist. So I'm pretty sure another Jamaican who's in another country is gonna like Money Heist too, right? So the segment is Jamaica. What you like is that. So they're making an assumption and then they test it to see if this is true. Obviously, there are a lot of assumptions in there. Unsupervised is I have this data on customers. Again, plug for the investors. Hashtag not sponsored. So you're reading an article and you're not really sure exactly the differences between the individuals who are reading your article, but you have data on them. So this technique allows you to just group them based on whatever variables you have in place, but you don't know exactly why they're being grouped. And then reinforcement learning does really well. The idea here is let's say you have 5 marketing campaigns, right? And you want to figure out what's the best combination of these marketing campaigns, right? So what you could do is send out from these 5 campaigns hundreds of different variations, and you just basically see which one does well, and you bring back together the best of each of them to get the super ad that you're looking for. And again, there are different segments in between these. There's semi-supervised, and some other stuff, but we'll just focus on these three. So how does machine learning work? Right? You start with data. So you have age, interests, life stage. You start with what you're trying to figure out. You put in a blender, which is you have an algorithm, a learning algorithm, and it tries to link all of these things together, and it outputs what it thinks is right. Based on that output, you can figure out if it did well or not, right? And you just pretty much repeat the process until you get an acceptable result. So I've seen a lot of memes and stuff with people saying it's pretty much just throwing more garbage at the problem until you get something out, right? It's not exactly that. Uh, there's a lot more finesse, obviously. It does use scientific methods, trial and error, in what you're doing, and it takes human understanding experience. That's the most important part of machine learning. So, generally speaking, this is how you start. You say define your objective. So you'd say, I want to sell more products to these people. Set your target. I need to sell 50 million pounds of paper, right? To these particular people. So you get your data and you say, okay, I know these are the types of people who like to buy these types of papers. I need to find more of them. But you already have information on who your current customers are. You can then train a model on that, and the model will try and figure out, are these new people coming in that you're viewing like your current people? And will they be likely to also like to buy 50 million pounds of paper, right? You test your model first, and then the big thing is you have to measure the business value. Because the idea is you can have an extremely good model, but there's no business value involved in that. It just doesn't make any sense. So think of a model that predicts um, how many people are going to come into a supermarket every hour, right? That can definitely be useful because you can decide to market and advertise at certain hours and stuff like that. Who's going to come in the supermarket every 1 second, right? It's really good at that. What necessarily would be the value of that? There could be value, but that seems kind of unnecessary, like too much. Sledgehammer trying to hit a fly, or a nuke trying to hit a fly, because what are you going to do within each second, right? And then you apply the model, and then you measure the actual business value, and then you rinse and repeat. All right, so audience exercise. Choose the next shape and color in this sequence. Feel free.
Okay.
I'll give you 15 seconds.
All
All
right.
right,
And
and
I
I
invite
invite the
members of
members
the
of the
audience to
audience to
also
also
drop their
drop their
comments in the
comments in the
chat
chat
as
as
well.
well.
Oh, I can't see the comments, so I'm not sure. How's everybody doing?
Okay. So I
Okay, so
think
I
they're
think they're
being
being
shy,
shy,
not
not
seeing any
seeing any
comments
comments
just
just
yet.
yet.
Okay.
But I
But
mean,
I
I
mean,
can
I
take
can
a
take a
stab at.
stab at it.
Yes, please.
All
All
right.
right.
So
So
I
I
see.
see.
So
So
someone in the
someone in the
comments is
comments is
saying
saying
red
red
circle.
circle.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
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 So we
So
have
we have
rain,
rain,
dry.
dry.
Then you
Then
have
you
the
have the
other
other
circles,
circles,
rain,
rain,
dry,
dry,
and
and
there's a
there's
red
a red
circle.
circle.
Yeah. So the idea is, and in this field that is ever evolving and changing, it's why did you pick red circle? What in this made you determine the exact color that was going to come and the exact shape? Because you have all of this information, you have numbers, you have text, you have colors, you have shapes, you have order. There's a lot. This is a complex problem for a machine, right? And the idea is our brains have developed this pattern recognition so effectively that some people say ghosts that we can actually weaponize this unconsciously. We can see patterns without even realizing instinctively. We can process like millions of parameters or data points just like this, not to get an exact thing, but we can do it well enough where we can focus on those very specific data points. that are needed to make a decision. So obviously the text had nothing to do with it. Obviously the number had nothing to do with it. But your brain excluded the things that were unnecessary to you, which is what we needed when we were living in the wilderness and foraging and stuff like that. We needed to get the
Yes.
noise out and be focused enough on what was trying to eat us or what we were trying to eat. Yeah, so that's very important. And that's what I try and do. I try and master that for objects that don't actually exist, which are machine learning models or more wholly AI models. Right. So what can AI do? You can predict. It's used a lot in sports right now. If you watch NFL, they actually have tracking chips on all of the gear that the individuals wear. So during that entire game where you watch NFL game, all of the movements are being tracked on the field, and they do this for a lot of reasons. So the first one is they're trying to figure out if these plays that they run were effective. They're trying to monitor the performance of their players. Are they running fast enough? Did something happen? And one of the most important things, if not the most important, is they use this to determine the effectiveness of the protective gear. So they're trying to identify specifically what types of hits result in concussions and bone breakages and stuff like that. And they take that data to figure out how to improve the protective gear, as well as decide if certain things should be ousted from the game. Certain type of tackles you can't do this. Maybe need a couple of seconds to prep for this to give somebody enough time, right? So it's about protecting lives as well as entertain as well, because there's actually a platform you can use to get access to that on-demand data. So it makes even more of a informed sports person. The next one is Netflix and Amazon. So they recommend things to you, products, services, content, and then also influence what you can do because they know your trigger points, right? So a lot of the marketing around this and that, a lot of things you take for granted, subliminal things, do actually have an effect on you making a decision. Whereas other times you're so sure about your decision, you just need to be presented with it faster, which is why recommendation engines are so important because they save you time and they save you effort. Next one is segmentation. Facebook does this really well and really badly, as you would see. It has resulted in some negatives around very toxic persons being clumped together to basically compound their toxicity. They're working on it. But the idea there is Facebook did really well because it connected you to creating an online community, one of the biggest companies in the world now with respect to interactions with humans and what they do. And again, majority of their revenue is actually coming from advertising. And that actually feeds into the segmentation and the recommendation because advertisers are paying Facebook to find you because you are probably going to spend money on what they're selling. So they can't find you because it's going to cost a lot of money to just send out ads everywhere to everybody. So they allow you to cleanly segment individuals. So we do a lot of specialization with that for brands as well. Next one is generate. So the guy you're seeing here isn't real. He is a Chinese anchor person that reads the Chinese evening news in English. So he converts Mandarin and the other languages into the English for English speakers. And it's a AI generated model. So the mouth movements and then the conversion of what he's saying from the different languages are just presented. So what they've done here is created even a bigger audience than they could have before who doesn't need a translator. And then identifiers. So Twitter and Gmail, they identify fraud so that you don't click on an email. And they do it based on the text in there, who sent it, when it was sent, and similar activities of fraudsters. And then Twitter is doing a big thing with respect to hate speech and that type of stuff, trying to figure out. And it may seem obvious to say, oh, yeah, man, you know hate speech because people are saying I hate you or they're being derogatory and stuff like that. But these groups have become very, very spy like in the way that they communicate now. So they
Yes.
use certain GIFs or GIFs, certain keywords, certain hand gestures, certain emojis to signal hate and racism. and it's developing on a regular basis because they're trying to communicate that type of stuff without getting caught. So that's why you need more advanced approaches to keep up with that. And then what can AI do? Let's see if you can hear this.
Artificial intelligence, the future frontier. These are the voyages of StarApple. Its mission to explore the cutting edge of artificial intelligence and analytics, to boldly take the Caribbean into the future and make Jamaica the global hub of innovation. Star Apple.
All right. So, did anyone hear that?
Yes, I heard it.
Okay, great. Just checking. So you can actually use AI to generate. So people are familiar with deepfakes, and that's swapping faces and stuff like that. But you can also use it for voices. Trek fan, if you didn't notice. Uh, and yeah, obviously we don't have enough money to pay um, Sir
Patrick
Patrick
Stewart.
Stewart to say that. So the idea there is you can actually use it for advertising purposes, right? So you can train it on anybody's voice. So one thing we're looking at is getting Jamaican celebrities to basically get paid a royalty, and then you can send something to like an individual abroad to say, I don't know, Dottie, Merry Christmas, right? For instance, so to give them that, and you don't need it, Sean Paul, to say it multiple times, right?
Artificial.
All right. So next one is again generation. So this is actually a project that we ran last year. We developed AI models that took the styles of Caribbean artists and then painted images and photos and then adjusted actual photos to get their paint style. So in a sense, we're kind of counterfeiting their paint style. But the idea there was, should I put the names here, but for Trinidadian artists, the very popular one, he has a certain style in play. Basically, just took all of his artwork, put it together, used a model to train on it, and it could actually imitate his paint strokes and his colors and his imagery. Same for Jamaican artists and Cuban artists as well. So there's a lot of value for creators in not necessarily generating completely new content, but generating offshoots of their current creativity. So you can use it to monetize creativity very quickly. And this is a very similar approach to what you do when you use like a filter on social media or your phone, and then add on like, I don't know, bunny ears or stuff like that. And you can also animate. So this is a new thing that's a little creepy. So this is the Great Mary Sequel. So this is an image of her from many years ago, and tool that we use allowed it to actually animate her face to make it look as if she was actually moving and smiling and stuff like that. And how this works is it was just train a lot of images of persons and then videos of them, and it figured out how to basically map the face and translate it to actual movement. And it freaked out a lot of my relatives when I tried it on um, deceased relatives. Yeah,
Naturally.
yeah. And then pretty much the deep fix. So this is Iron Einstein. Why? Why not? Why not? Okay, so with respect to AI, the next step is really data analytics. We'll be pretty quick with this. There are different types of data analytics. Specific thing being reported. You have predicted, which means I need to find an answer to something that's going to happen in the future. And then you have prescriptive, and prescriptive focuses on what should I do to get the most value of the insights that I've actually identified. All right. And the really important one is actually diagnostic. So diagnostic is actually saying why did this happen, right? Because if you understand the mechanics of something, then you can actually take advantage of it for your best interests. And the idea here is in regards to the importance of having certain people involved. So C-suite are like executives or leaders of companies, And a big part of AI is data driven culture, which is when you're making a decision, it's completely fine if it's gut feeling, but you need to make sure that you look at the data you have on hand to come up with evidence
Yes.
that justifies what you're doing, which goes back to the quote. Sherlock Holmes was always right. It's that he would base his data, he would base, sorry, his inference on the data he had available. And if it was wrong, he would adjust it as necessary. So as he got additional data points, he would adjust his viewpoint and his mind, but he had to be very objective. And machine learning is a subset of AI. So it is a subset. So technically, when you say, oh, machine learning and AI, it's pretty redundant. It's kind of like saying car, I have a car and I have a Honda, right? Or I have a car and I have a Porsche, right? So a Porsche and a Honda, they are cars, right? But they're specific types of cars with a different level of capabilities and performance. AI will put us all out of work. Unlikely, but you have the little time thing there. It is possible that certain jobs will definitely be eliminated. But the idea with that is it's providing individuals enough freedom and ability to focus on the things that they love, right? So you want to focus on a certain area of your life, and an industry may not will actually allow that industry to exist at a certain point in time. So in the future, jobs are going to be more focused on creativity, human interaction, your ability to solve problems versus menial stuff. So one big hit will obviously be farming, but these things have actually happened before. So a big industry that was destroyed by innovation was they used to have elevator attendants. So you go in an elevator, there'd be a guy there, and he'd be responsible for clicking the button for you and closing the door and then cranking some stuff. So he was there for your safety as well as to select the floor that you were on. And this was a full time job all over the world until someone developed a way to safely control the elevator with a click of a button and then to automate the opening and the closing of the doors. That algorithm, right? So you could say that it's a lot safer now, it's a lot more efficient, but it did destroy those jobs. Those individuals had to find something else to do. But but with that, it's not to say that you should actually resist it at this point. It's more you need to prepare yourself because AI is just a tool that supports any industry. So you need to know enough about it such that you can incorporate it in the work that you do. That will make you even more valuable as an employee as well as a customer. That's a big thing because you can kind of see exactly when people are trying to, let's say, nudge you in certain directions that aren't to your best interest. We spend more time with AI than humans. Yeah, some people actually do because your phone, your internet, you go online, all these things. Underneath all of that is some decision engine, some algorithms, some form of AI that's trying to take your data understanding and push you towards what they want to. So we get advertised to so much at this point that we're almost null to it unless it's something that we're really interested in. And AI just needs a lot of data to work. This is completely untrue. We are seeing a big thing now with large language models. People may have heard of that. Pretty much you're trying to create a model that can interact with you as if you're a real person, as if it's a real person, trying to generate poems. And we've done a lot of that as well. But it's about quality of data, not quantity. So just because somebody has a whole bunch of data doesn't mean it's useful. And it doesn't even mean that they can find a use for it at any point in time, right? The quality of the data is more important than the quantity of the data. And these are some general rules that exist with respect to organizations. So that's where we get into okay, job security. So these are the areas and famous companies and positions in the companies that rely on data analytics and AI to do well. So with respect to YouTube, YouTube tracks views, watch behavior, all of these things to determine how to price your content for advertisers. but also to show you how to improve how you present your message. So for full-time YouTube content creators, they rely on YouTube analytics, those dashboards, and the insight gained from there, and then they experiment and test out different ways of doing it. And there's a lot of benefit and value towards that, but it is experimentation, trial and error. And YouTube also use it to generate revenue because, again, they know you so well they can connect you to advertisers. If you do something really well, you can charge for it. As a COO, so this is the person in charge of operations. So this person is fundamental to the organization. So pretty much, Amazon here is big warehouse of stuff, right? The logistics king all over the world, right? So what they do here is they use a lot of that data to determine how to reduce costs, how to get you to the point of actually same day delivery, which was an amazing feat. It's not 100% always at this point, but if it wasn't for AI optimizing the arrangements, the locations of warehouses and all that stuff, you wouldn't be able to get packages so quickly and so cheaply. And they use data, but they use quality data for their need. And a big thing now is Amazon obviously aided in the destruction of malls, and they're now actually using these closed down malls to store packages. CTO, Chief Technical Officer again. So with that, a big thing that they were able to do for YouTube and Netflix is with respect to video streaming quality and buffering. So when you're watching a video and it pauses, it sucks. So they created an algorithm that actually reduces the quality of the video while you're watching it, such that it runs consistent. But to do that, it needs to understand the quality of your signal, the length of the video you're watching, how much you're gonna really notice if the quality drops and stuff like that, because they're focused on your experience, right? So they want the video to not pause at any point in time. CEO, big thing with Amazon. So Amazon actually bought Whole Foods. So that's like weird, right? Why would Amazon, fully digital place that doesn't even need to create their own products, buy a supermarket? Data. They had customer data. And they can use AI to tap into this customer data to sell you stuff in Whole Foods and also sell you stuff in Amazon, right? And the idea there is identifying what is on Whole Foods customer. So that goes into the different types of modeling techniques that we mentioned prior, right? And they use it to say, okay, you probably like oranges. I'm going to sell you an orange or a t-shirt, or I'm going to sell you a Halloween costume. That's a big orange. I'm going to recommend that to you because I've used machine learning to determine that you are likely to wear an orange costume on Halloween. And then that's how they make their money. Content creation, like I mentioned before, it's reached a crazy point. So there are actually a few companies where 90% of their content written uses AI to write the content. It just goes out, looks at what's going on online or wherever. It understands the writing styles of the organization and just creates these newspapers. A lot of them are kind of ridiculous. The really, really good ones you can't access because they're just so good. And then another benefit of that is it allows you to create because you know what you're, and then the more articles you get, the more people that like your articles, the more you can advertise, the more people are on your platform, the more advertisers will be willing to actually pay you to push a message to them.
Yes.
Yeah, question?
No, I'm just fully tuned in.
Okay, great. Chief Digital Officer. So this has been done by quite a few brands, even some locally that we're working with, using our followers to develop targeted ads. So brands that do it really well are like Wendy's. I really like Wendy's marketing in North America. So they found a way to kind of tap into that weird humor of, of of young millennials and Gen Zs to get them regularly interacting and engaging with the brand, which is pretty much free advertising for their product, right? That's very important. And then one thing, look at Coca Cola. Coca Cola's message, brand message, isn't about Coca Cola itself, right? It's about the feeling you had at this point and togetherness and we are one and all this stuff. They don't talk about it sugar water that's colored. That's not really anything. It's more the brand value. So using the data like this allows you to tap into that and tap into persons that would probably be interested in there. So to the top left, you'll see some people, pale people, who are jumping in water for whatever reason, right? So they tap into say what people who kind of follow us, what are they interested in? Oh, jumping in water, that's very cool. Let's stage an event for that increases the sale of Coca Cola. And thank you.
Thank you as well, Adrian. Adrian, I'm hearing an echo. I don't know if that's your mic causing that.
I'm not sure. Let me mute and see.
All right, let me try again. All right, awesome. Yes, the echo is gone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
All right, awesome. So thank you for that wonderful presentation, Adrian. I mean, I can tell you, I certainly learned a lot. You know, my knowledge of AI obviously was very limited before, but you definitely gave a lot of key insights, and I guess you kind of shifted my perspectives. To kind of show me these new points that I wouldn't have known before. And I mean, definitely AI is something that has penetrated our daily life. I guess so much so that, we don't even know when it actually has done so. You said two very key things, and I want to kind of just jump on them. I know we are basically wrapping up soon, but it's very interesting because you spoke about the human element and AI. And I think for a lot of persons, that has always been a fear of AI, making humans obsolete. You said in your presentation that AI cannot work without humans, but certainly the extent to which it can or cannot, I guess, is where a lot of persons, kind of feel uncomfortable. And so, you spoke about as professionals, I guess being proactive and understanding how AI can actually make our lives better and actually trying to evolve to bridge that gap. So, what are some of the things that, I'm a professional working in a company and, I see a lot of automation happening because that
Mhm.
actually is happening. I see a lot of automation happening and I know start to fear that perhaps my job becomes obsolete and I start to worry about my job security. Like, what are some of the tangible things that I can do to actually help me evolve alongside these introductions of automation?
Right, right. So glad you mentioned the automation. So with respect to a lot of levels of automation, and you could clump it in digital transformation, is that it may not actually AI that's being used, right? It's just finding those rules and creating algorithms, right? Which isn't really decision making. It's just whatever that word is, basically for step to step to step to make things efficient because you're doing things over and over. I wouldn't be worried about, well, if you're worried about the automation of certain processes, it may actually be that, and it may sound harsh, that your job is not useful to the organization.
Yeah.
Because if they can automate you out of your job, then you're not providing the value that's really necessary. So the recommendation there would be to pivot towards more decision making for your supervisor, your board, your directors, and stuff like that. You can go to them and say, "I want to run an experiment."
Yeah.
That's really how I started. So I didn't traditionally start in data analytics and AI wanting to get into that field. I started in a science background, doing research, right? And working up at UN, doing labs and physics and stuff like that, right? And then getting into the field of finance, pretty much, and actual science and risk management, and applying those scientific techniques. And around that time is when pretty much data science was coined as a term for what I was doing. And obviously, machine learning, which is again subset of AI, was a big part of that. And I just spent the decade focusing on that, improving skills and finding value, practical value. That's the most important thing in these techniques. But don't be worried about don't worry about automation until you realize probably just stamping documents, for instance. But
Yeah.
nobody's being really hired to do manual tasks like that for newer industries. So for older industries, you still need that manual stuff. So a lot of farming techniques, it isn't at the point where it's affordable to use a robot, for instance, to pick certain types of fruit or certain types of produce because they're going to damage them or they
Yeah.
really can't tell if they're going to be ripe at a certain point in time. So those things where you need creativity, um, some form of human expertise, delicate hands, or like understanding individuals, I don't see AI coming in and doing much about that for a very long time. And to be frank, I don't think it's necessary to have it to that point because it's a tool to support us. To support us, it's not supposed to replace us, but it's going to replace certain jobs because the idea is there are jobs where maybe 60% of what you're doing can be automated, and then they say, well, that 40% isn't worth the money I'll pay you, so they'll hire somebody else for less money, right? I'm not saying that's a good thing, not saying it's a bad thing, but you can prepare yourself from
Yeah.
now and pivot. But content creation, one of those things. I know it just sounds like oh, kind of Gen Z, whatever, dance up and whatever, but there's a lot of value in content creation.
Yeah, and no, it doesn't sound, idealistic or far-fetched, because, and you
Yeah,
raised a very important point about, upskilling and how important that is, because truthfully, when you look at the job market now, the jobs that existed now,
yeah,
10, 20 years ago, they didn't exist. And I mean, if you look at any job survey now, they tell you literally the top 10 jobs in the world, the top 5 jobs in the world: data analytics, data mining, data engineering. They have some aspect of analytics to it. And almost any field that you're in now, as you said, they're not necessarily hiring persons anymore to do,
hmm,
traditionally menial jobs. But
yeah,
it's all about how can you interpret data and actually, well, analyze data and interpret it, to get the job done. So that's a very important point.
right. You're
um,
definitely
I have
right.
another question for you before we wrap up. But before
Sure.
I take my question, there are actually two questions in the chat. And again, just inviting persons who are watching the stream to interact with us. You can post your questions in the chat. And Adrian, we are getting a lot of compliments and commendations on your presentation. A lot of persons are
Sure.
saying brilliant presentation, great presentation. Some persons are considering career changes. So it seems like you have gained some new, followers. Right. So a question in the chat, and this question is from Marcel. So
Mhm.
Marcel is asking, are there standard tools out there for the layman to use, or are all AI tools created based on its need or purpose?
Not all. You're right. A lot are pretty general. To be frank, the whole point of deep learning, how that really came out was you had professors looking at it, and they spent decades trying to create a very easy way of doing it. And the only reason it took off now is because we have so much data and we have processing power in play. So yeah, there are quite a few layman. I hate saying layman too, because again, everyone on this call, every human in existence is still way smarter than any AI in existence, right? But yeah, but even the tools you're using now probably have it. So it depends on what. I would need to know
Yeah.
exactly what you're trying to do. There are very general purpose stuff that wouldn't be useful at this point for other industries or problems because AI is very narrow. We're in the point of narrow AI. So the idea there is um, voice recognition. You build it, it just does voice recognition. You can't give it a picture and it'll know what the picture is. Same thing for image recognition and stuff like that on YouTube. Oh, okay. Something
Okay.
popped up. Something else. Yeah.
All right, awesome. And then another
Mhm.
question, and it's funny because this question is actually similar to the one that I would be posing, right? So the question is, how do the mics on our phones utilize AI? So Julian is asking. He said sometimes I don't
Mhm.
browse stuff on social media, but I may say it, and sometimes I might even think it too. So
Mhm.
sometimes I might not say anything aloud. I might think it, and
Mhm.
then you see it pop up on your social media feed. Like, what is that about?
Well, all right. So obviously, I'm not in those companies to say that they're not doing this, but my experience and view is it's unlikely that you are specifically being targeted if they're doing this correctly. So it's more there are behaviors that you're currently doing that you don't really think are important or lead to anything, and they're using that to pick up on your patterns. So you may have been talking about, and it's happened to me quite a few times as
Mhm.
well. So my brother says, "Oh, he wants us to do a trip to Disney World. He's never been to Disney World or Disneyland or whatever." I'm like, okay, great. And then within like 2 days, there's this thing came up on my Google ads about like a Disneyland, come back to Disneyland or open blah 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 type thing, get a discount or whatever. I was like, wow. But then I realized that I wasn't specifically looking for stuff for Disneyland, but I was looking for Disney related items online, right?
Mhm.
And then they could use that. So the idea is if you thought about it, you probably physically did something connected to your thought. And then there is a data scientist somewhere, there's a system set up that is specifically created to pick up on those patterns and then try and link it back. And all of this, there's no certainty in AI. There's no 100%, right? Everything is a percentage. So there is always a percentage that you are going to want to go to Disneyland. Maybe it's 3 or 5%. And then they're just kind of waiting. And then you type in Mickey and then boom, it goes to 15%. And then you type in, I don't know, Marvel or DC or something and say, oh, it goes to like 40, 50%. Yeah. So I don't think. But how you can do it is if you're recording your voice, let's say you're using like Hey Google or Alexa or something at the time you speak to them, they record what you just said. So they have the wave patterns and they convert these wave patterns into a data set and then they feed that into a model. And the model is looking specifically at these wave patterns. And to be frank, we as human beings are majority of what we do is very
Routine.
consistent across. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I say hello, hello pretty much has a certain wave pattern. The tonality is going to change and that stuff, but the general wave pattern is going to be the same. When it goes into other cultures now and you're saying hola, for instance, that's when it wouldn't necessarily know what it means. But the idea is if you have a general vocabulary of words, they've collected thousands and millions of voice snippets of these words and trained models to identify each of them. And then that's really how they know what you're saying. So then they convert it now into what you said in text, right? Or a data set, a JSON file or whatever. And then they feed that in another model that its purpose is really just to say, okay, you said these 15 words. Here are the 10 actions that people usually expect when you say 15, these 15 words together. And that's pretty
Okay.
much what it does. And
Yeah.
because processing power is so fast, it happens in milliseconds, so you don't even realize. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I said, that question was actually kind of a brilliant segue to what I guess I would wrap up on. For you, a data scientist, I think one of the fear, and I'm seeing Raquel, posted in our chat as well. So true. She said, I think it, and then I see it. Or I talk over the phone with a friend, and then the same night or the next day, it pops up in my email or Facebook. And, it goes back to, that kind of intrusive
Yeah.
and invasive nature of AI. I think a lot of us, have seen the movies. We've seen I think there's a movie actually called AI with Will
Hmm.
Smith, right? We've
Yeah.
seen the Ex
It's
Machina,
machina, yeah. Yeah.
Ex Machina, so we've seen all these movies about, AI and robots evolving and, essentially waging a world war on humans. That's obviously the extreme, but as
Yeah.
it is now, I think for a lot of persons, and then so much data is collected on a daily basis. Everything you do on your phone, every app you access, every website, everything, they want your data. We had the incident the other day with Alexa and the situation with the little girl. She said,
Yeah.
Alexa,
Yeah.
what challenge can I do? And Alexa told her to basically electrocute herself.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So with all this evolution of AI, and you spoke about being a fan of Star Trek. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a fan, but and I don't want to age myself here, but I remember my father watching Star Trek every Saturday night at 9 on JBC. Back then it was, right?
Yeah.
And you saw these things and you're like, it blew your mind. You're like, is this even possible? And we're here now, but it does seem so invasive. It seems
Hmm.
so intrusive, and sometimes it feels a little bit too much or dangerous. I'm putting all
Hmm.
of my data out there. Like, what are your thoughts on this? How do we kind of navigate this kind of intrusive nature of AI?
Yeah. So that's great. Yeah, that's why I started in science fiction as well. That's why I did my degrees in science and maths. Yeah, JV. Wow, that's a long time ago. Yeah. So, uh, I would say it is dangerous, but I'm more afraid of humans than AI. Because
True.
the main reason is the reason that AI is dangerous is because it's being created by human beings. And a big thing that has come out now in the last couple of years is ethical AI,
Yeah.
because people have realized the dangers and risks and the biases. A big part of this bias. So the idea here is there were cases of social media, well, models on social media created by Twitter and other companies that were actually racially and gender biased, and they weren't consciously created to be that way as far as we know. It was more you had a very specific group of individuals. Pretty much you had like North American white males building all these models. So when they were looking for data, they said, oh, let's look for some data. White males. And so they weren't trying to be racist or exclusive. It's just, oh, that's what they're used to, and they didn't see it as an issue. So that's why we need the inclusivity included in the development of all of these models, because this bias just pops in, and then the issue now is the same bias is actually coming the financial sectors, right? Globally, where you'll have situations of women having issues getting loans, for instance, and it's not necessarily because, oh, she put gender female there as an application. It's more there was a um, gender limitation placed on women in that particular culture, and they're just now being able to be financially independent. So you have decades of them not being able to build up their wealth, and then that comes across now in the applications. So indirectly, it is biasing based on gender, even though it wasn't developed that way. And the concern is the people building it don't consider that. There's this big risk component in there of a lack of consideration of certain demographics. So that's why a big thing now, and we do it ourselves, is our own AI ethics, where we actually test our models to see if we tweak these things, if we focus on these areas or these types of persons, is there going to be too much advantage placed on them, or are we going to provide a negative outcome because of these individuals? But that's why we need the carbon involved in the process, and there are a lot of smaller entities trying to do it, but it has to be pushed. So we try and push it formally for like all of our projects, where we focus on very key factors. So we have a checklist, we have a matrix in place. We have to check all of these specific stuff before. So my background is also in risk management, enterprise risk management. So I learned a lot from that, and I instill that into the company in how we apply things. Because with risk management, you are trying to look for the worst case. You are trying to break stuff and destroy stuff and figure out how to destroy it before, so that you can stop it from happening and put control in place. But that's why we need every individual across every country. We need the Caribbean developing our own AI infrastructure and stuff, because when we use tools outside of the Caribbean, they could be fine for most of what we're doing, but when we're trying to be very specific to our needs, it's not that the tools are trying to bias us consciously. It's just they're not used to our culture. They're not used to the way we do things, the way we talk, the way we consider stuff. So think of like initially, let's say we're searching for a food recommendation, and you took a picture of a patty, right? And you had a model that was developed on foods in North America. It's what is going to pop out something weird. It might pop out as foot. If you squint your eyes and look at that patty, it kind of look like a foot.
Yeah.
Uh, So yeah, inclusivity is extremely important.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Adrian. I mean, you touched on something really deep, and I think that is what we'll kind of take away from here. That a lot of persons might have that kind of concern about AI being invasive, but as you said, AI might be dangerous, but humans are actually more dangerous because they're the ones behind it. So that's definitely a deeper perspective to look at it because of
Mhm.
just the many different ways that AI has actually made our life way just more easier than it used to be.
Mhm.
Thank you for your presentation this evening. I certainly enjoyed talking to you. I learned so much, and we're looking forward to seeing you continue doing big things in this space. I mean, you've already started to do big things, and so we'll definitely be watching you to continue doing these things. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you to everyone who joined us today on YouTube, on LinkedIn. I hope you learned as much as I did. And that's it, guys. We're finished. I am your host,
Okay.
Sandra Bingham.
Thanks, Sandra.
Um, taking you through disruption, disrupting through chaos and not so much chaos sometimes from the Pandemonium team. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care, Adrian. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Sandra. Bye,
All
everyone.
right. Take care. Bye, everyone.